Halo Legends is an anime series comprised of 8 episodes that were released back in 2010. The series was based on a famous science fiction video game franchise, Halo. With the exception of a few strategy titles and top-down shooter spin-offs, most Halo games were first-person shooters set in the 26th century. In the Halo universe, humanity is fighting in a desperate and extremely destructive interstellar war against a theocratic alien alliance known as the Covenant. Mainline Halo games focus on the journey of a legendary human super soldier Master Chief and his AI companion Cortana, but most of the aforementioned anime episodes tell completely independent, standalone stories that feature never-before-seen characters from the Halo universe. One of these stories is Prototype, an episode animated by Bones, also known as the studio behind My Hero Academia. Prototype features impressive action scenes, awesome-looking sci-fi armor, and to the surprise of some viewers, Buddhist themes. Before we explore the Buddhist undertones of Halo Legends Prototype, I must issue a spoiler warning. In this video I'm going to discuss plot details of the episode in question, so if you haven't seen Halo Legends Prototype and don't want it spoiled, you can stop the video, go watch it, and return for the following discussion. Otherwise, if you already seen the episode or simply don't care about spoilers, you're good to go. Enjoy the ride. The episode takes place during the Human Covenant War on the planet of Algolis, one of the many human colonies established throughout the galaxy. The planet is being overrun by Covenant forces, while human soldiers are desperately trying to hold them off until all of the civilian personnel on the planet is evacuated. After finally receiving the order to retreat, all human forces begin to fall back, except for the Hades Corps, a demolition squad led by the main character of the episode known as Ghost. His call sign is not accidental, as Ghost has a reputation for being emotionally distant, dispassionate, almost lifeless, and displaying absence of feelings, which leads to some characters questioning his very humanity.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why they call him the Ghost then, isn't it? And why the brass always decides to put him in charge of demolition jobs, because he's not even human!
Just before the Hades Corps soldiers lose all hope of making out of their situation alive, Ghost shows up driving an advanced prototype combat suit, ready to single-handedly fight off the remaining Covenant invaders, save his men, and most importantly, redeem himself by atoning for the lives lost under his command 3 years prior to the events of the episode. Ghost is aware that his endeavor is a suicide mission, and as he is fighting the alien forces, he keeps reflecting back on the events and mistakes of the past that led him to his decision. Around here is the moment where teachings of Buddhism become relevant. As Ghost reflects upon the self-sacrifice that he is going to have to make, he shares a short but very interesting insight about the nature of the soul.
That's all a soul is. An obstacle. Something to overcome.
Such an understanding of the soul as an obstacle, is very Buddhist-like. To understand why, we would need to take a look at the teachings of Buddhism, specifically the 3 marks or the 3 main attributes of existence. First there's dukkha, which translates from Sanskrit as suffering. The second one would be anitya, or in Pali anicca, which translates as impermanence. And the most important to our discussion, anatman, or anatta in Pali, which translates as no self or no soul. The doctrine of anatta, or the doctrine of no self, claims that the apparent existence of an individual soul is an illusion created by our ignorance and sustained by desire. According to Buddhists, a strictly defined personal identity with a permanent, substantial existence has no reality behind it. What we consider to be a soul is actually an evolving stream of psychic phenomena that gives an impression of a consistent personality due to our experience of memory. In his book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, British philosopher Alan Watts, who was greatly influenced by Buddhism and many other traditions of Eastern philosophy, illustrates the main principles behind the doctrine of anatta with the following words. While you are watching this present experience, are you aware of someone watching it? Can you find, in addition to the experience itself, an experiencer? Can you, at the same time, read this sentence and think about yourself reading it? You will find that to think about yourself reading it, you must for a brief second stop reading. The first experience is reading, the second experience is thought I am reading. Can you find any thinker who is thinking the thought I am reading? In other words, when present experience is the thought I am reading, can you think of yourself thinking this thought? He continues, to be aware then is to be aware of thoughts, feelings, sensations, desires, and all other forms of experience. Never at any time are you aware of anything which is not experience, not a thought or feeling, but instead an experiencer, thinker, or feeler. If this is so, what makes us think that any such thing exists? And so Alan Watts concludes, the notion of a separate thinker, of an I distinct from the experience, comes from memory and from the rapidity with which thought changes. It's like whirling of burning stick to give the illusion of a continuous circle of fire. In Buddhism, the ability to gain insight into the illusory nature of the soul is one of the conditions necessary to fulfill in order to reach the highest goal of spiritual development, the Enlightenment. According to Buddhists, this achievement frees the mind from suffering in the endless circle of death and rebirth known as samsara. Much like Ghost from Halo Legends Prototype, the followers of Buddhism see the soul as an obstacle, in their case, an obstacle on the path to liberation from suffering. The soul is also seen as a limit because its existence depends on the dichotomy between subject and object. The subject ends where the object begins and vice versa. Once the subject is eliminated, its limits are eliminated as well, and a higher state of enlightened awareness becomes possible. When it comes to anime, it's worth mentioning that a similar idea has also been explored in a cult classic anime feature film Ghost in the Shell, specifically in the speech of a character known as Puppet Master.
You're talking about redefining my identity. I want to guarantee that I can still be myself.
There isn't one. Why would you wish to? All things change in a dynamic environment. Your effort to remain what you are is what limits you.
Self-Transcendence is exactly what Ghost achieves in Halo Legends Prototype. By choosing to sacrifice his life, in other words, his self, Ghost gains the power to save his soldiers. The prototype suit is not enough because it takes far more than the power of technology to manifest the courage to engage in a fight knowing you won't come back from it alive. To do that, you have to be human in the ultimate sense of the word, and as we are about to see, this phrase gains an entirely new meaning when it is observed within the context of Buddhist teachings. The dictum "be human" is referenced to multiple times throughout the course of the episode. It's one of the last words addressed to Ghost from the dying female soldier of his platoon, and it also serves as a voice command that initiates the self-destruct sequence of the prototype suit. The relationship between the phrase and Buddhist teachings is this. Multiple schools of Mahayana Buddhism talk about the idea of Buddha nature, sometimes called the Tathagata Garbha in Sanskrit. The term refers to the latent potential for Buddhahood that lies hidden within all living beings. The idea is based upon the Madhyamaka Buddhist belief that the distinction between this world of suffering, the samsara, and the blissful state of nirvana reveals itself to be illusory once the enlightenment is achieved. In reality, nirvana is already present in our everyday world of samsara, but according to Buddhists, we are blind to this truth due to our ignorance, desires, and dualistic way of thinking. If we were to overcome these attachments, we would become aware of the Buddhahood, or Buddha nature, present even in the apparently flawed and fragile life forms such as ourselves. It is said that the Buddha nature is an element that is essential to our humanity, and if we were to look back at the Halo Legends episode, by overcoming the obstacle that is his soul and committing himself to be human, the main character Ghost becomes the embodiment of the proverbial Buddha nature, or human nature. In other words, he embodies an element of human existence that is not tied to a specific individual, but is a common principle that manifests throughout all human beings. Ghost's final act of self-sacrifice can also be seen as a symbolic expression of Buddhist enlightenment. At the end of the Halo Legends Prototype episode, Ghost destroys the remaining Covenant forces along with himself by initiating a nuclear explosion. The analogy between enlightenment and the use of nuclear weapons has already been pointed out in the autobiography of the 20th century Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, as he reflected upon the global threat of his time posed by the Cold War and mutually assured destruction. As Jung wrote, "Today man can extinguish all higher life on Earth by radioactivity. The idea of world annihilation is already suggested by the Buddha. By means of enlightenment, the samsara chain, the chain of causality which leads inevitably to old age, sickness, and death, can be broken so that the illusion of being comes to an end." Of course, such an interpretation of Buddhist enlightenment might come off as overly pessimistic, but nevertheless serves as a very effective and dramatic metaphor. Moreover, the analogy between nuclear annihilation and enlightenment might make a little bit more sense if we were to keep in mind the words of an American spiritual teacher and mystic Adyashanti, who said that the enlightenment is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It's seeing through the facade of pretense. It's the complete eradication of everything we imagined to be true. It is important to keep in mind that the doctrine of anatta may not refer to a literal extinguishing of consciousness. After all, the term Buddha translates as the awakened one, and Buddhism itself can in some sense be viewed as a religion that worships the psychological function of awareness, an awareness that is personified by Shakyamuni and the bodhisattvas of the Mahayana pantheon. Instead of referring to some form of suicidal self-harm, the doctrine of anatta can be interpreted as an encouragement to overcome oneself and one's limits. It refers to the act of self-transcendence through practical insight, as opposed to one that is merely theoretical in nature. It reminds us to not limit ourselves by identifying with our social image, the Jungian persona that is molded by the need to meet the expectations of others at the cost of our own authenticity and freedom. Once we bring ourselves to achieve that, we, much like the protagonist of Halo Legends Prototype, cease to be a shallow, lifeless ghost and become something that can be referred to as an authentic human being.
And for one last instant, I'm human again.
If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and press the notification bell to support the channel. Thank you in advance. Take care.